Hello. Today, Oregon News and Views is finishing up its first full year of covering Oregon politics. This week, we present part 1 of a review of the year, followed by part 2 next week. Welcome to Oregon News and Views from Social Advance. I'm Alan Zundel.
And I'm Charles Dunaway. The year began with the Democrats having high hopes for the upcoming legislative session. That's because in the November 2018 election, they had won a 3/5 supermajority in both houses, so they could pass new taxes. But we made this observation in the very first edition of Oregon News and Views posted on January 5th.
If the Republicans can stick together and stay off the floor, they can block any vote from taking place.
That comment turned out to be prophetic. But even before Republicans began to fight the Democrats' agenda, Democrats had problems of their own. Democrat Brad Avakian, the outgoing commissioner of the Bureau of Labor and Industry, released a report in January charging the Democratic leaders of both houses with failing to adequately address complaints of sexual harassment in the state legislature. When it came time for legislators to vote on the new session's leadership, Democratic Senator Shemaiah Fagan of Portland voted against re-electing longtime Senate President Peter Courtney. This because of his mishandling of the harassment complaints. Both Courtney and House Speaker Tina Kotek were hit with lawsuits related to the complaints, and by the end of February, further complaints against Courtney had put him on the defensive. He felt compelled to make an apologetic speech on the Senate floor, but it came across as half-hearted.
This has given me a lot to think about. As the Oregon Law Commission report says, given the power dynamics in the state capitol, cultural change must begin with and can only be sustained by the capital's most powerful leaders.
Meanwhile, Democratic Governor Kate Brown, fresh off her November election victory, saw her January inaugural address interrupted by environmental protesters.
Having the privilege to serve Oregon is an incredible honor, and one that I take very seriously.
The shouting was from members of Southern Oregon Rising Tide protesting the governor's neutral stance on the proposed Pacific Connector pipeline to transport natural gas across Southern Oregon to Jordan Cove at Coos Bay. The issue would continue to incite activists throughout the year. The Democrats' environmental agenda focused on a carbon cap and invest bill called the Clean Energy Jobs Act, which was meant to address the climate crisis. Hundreds of people, organized by the group Renew Oregon, came to Salem to lobby for it. Here is Governor Brown addressing them.
Well, good morning and welcome to your state capitol. I understand there's about 800 people here today. Well, are you ready to help get House Bill 2020 over the finish line?
The legislature had been working on various versions of the bill for over a decade, but in February, when it came to a vote in the Joint Committee on Carbon Reduction, Republicans were still not satisfied.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to be a no on this at this stage.
It's just, I don't want my name in any way associated with this bill.
But I want to state, as you did before, that in no way means that I am in any support of any part or section of this legislation at this time.
If we were voting on this bill as it sits today, I would be a vehement no.
If this bill was brought forth on the House today to vote on, I would be a no.
Republicans were also unhappy with the rent control bill that passed the Senate Housing Committee that month. They complained of having little input into the bill as it was being rushed through. Here's Republican Senator Tim Knopp of Bend.
Apparently we're in a very big hurry to pass this legislation because we're not going to have a fiscal or revenue impact, which we normally do.
Just a week later, the bill passed the full Senate on a straight party line vote, and here are Democratic Senator Shemaiah Fagan and Republican Senator Dallas Hurd.
Senate Bill 608 will have an impact immediately for hundreds of thousands of Oregonians who rent their homes, but are one rent spike or no cause eviction away from putting their kids to bed in the back seat of a car.
Some of the grumpy minority members like myself, we actually have some background in housing supply side economics, and I'd like to believe that someday you will come to have the fullest level of respect for us that I do for you.
The bill then quickly passed the State House of Representatives and was signed into law by the governor. Democrats said they were delivering what they promised to voters, but Republicans felt steamrolled. Another top priority for Democrats was to increase education funding. At the end of February, 5,000 teachers, students, and other supporters rallied at the state capitol and lobbied legislators in support of this goal.
Meanwhile, Republicans conducted the first of what eventually became 3 legislative boycotts, refusing to show up for a joint committee dealing with harassment issues in the state legislature. They were protesting the Democratic chair of the committee, Mitch Greenlick, who insulted a couple of lobbyists testifying before the House Committee on Health Care, which he also chaired. Here are pharmaceutical lobbyist Rocky Dolam and Representative Greenlick.
Including a task force that we haven't even implemented recommendations on.
I've been listening to your guys' comments for 16 years, and generally, you're not stupid. In this case, you appear to be stupid.
In response, House Speaker Tina Kotek removed Greenlick from his positions as chair of each committee. She also removed Republican Bill Post from his seat on the House Judiciary Committee for insulting Senator Shemia Fagan on Twitter. And Secretary of State Dennis Richardson died at the end of February. Richardson was the only Republican holding a statewide office, having won his seat in 2016. He was eventually replaced by former state senator Bev Clarno, also a Republican, as the law required, who said she would not run to keep the office in 2020.
In March, the state legislature agreed to pay a combined total of $1.1 million to 8 victims of sexual harassment who worked in the Capitol. Senate President Peter Courtney and House Speaker Tina Kotek both released public apologies for their handling of the problem. Courtney also announced he would take 2 weeks off to deal with a stress-related eye ailment. When he returned to the Senate, he made a more forceful public apology, but this did not put the issue to rest for everyone. Here are Courtney and Democratic Senator Sarah Gelser.
I publicly apologize to any and all survivors that have experienced any form of harassment, sexual harassment, workplace harassment in the state capitol. We must do better. I must do better.
And yet, every person in power still has their job. No person that could have stopped this, has engaged in this, has paid a fine. Nobody has had a vote on the Senate floor. Even the person that did this to these people got to negotiate his own exit and got paid for work that he did not do.
Committees in both houses were working on a set of campaign finance reform proposals. It was supposed to be a bipartisan effort. A Senate committee passed a bill to refer to the voters an amendment to the Oregon Constitution permitting campaign finance limits. It only passed, however, on a party line vote. Here are Democratic Senator Jeff Golden, the chair of the committee, and Republican Senator Fred Girard.
I know there's some concern that when people aggregate money in this kind of way, it advantages Democrats or people on the left side of the spectrum, and maybe culturally there's evidence for that because it is like a union practice, but there's no reason to think it would be limited to one end of the spectrum.
This is the very example of what I fear the most. The majority party doing what they want without incorporating what the minority party wants into a bill and cramming it down our throats. And I want election reform like anybody else, but I want it done fairly.
In April, Democrats unveiled their Student Success Act, a bill to increase education funding by passing a new gross receipts tax on large business corporations. Here is Representative Nancy Nathanson in hearings before the Joint Committee on Student Success, followed by comments from a representative of an advocacy group for business.
What we're looking at is a very broad-based business tax that would be spread very thinly over many businesses at a very low rate. And because for many years, individual Oregonians have been paying the lion's share of income tax going to the general fund. We are also including in this plan an income tax reduction for all but the top tier of individual taxpayers.
Now, while there's a preference among some in the legislature to view this tax in isolation, our members don't have the luxury of doing so. They must also take into consideration the impact of things like new Medicaid-related tax increases, a payroll tax to fund a paid family leave program, new taxes or fees associated with a carbon measure, and a new 50-cent per employee per hour assessment. And this is to just name a few. Additionally, without structural reform, much of the new $2 billion tax for education will be consumed by the state's increasing pension costs.
The pension costs he was referring to are those needed to meet obligations of the Public Employees Retirement System known as PERS. Over-optimistic predictions of investment returns and the 2008 recession left PERS with a big shortfall in what is needed to pay for future obligations. On May 1st, the House of Representatives took up the Student Success Act, but to stall it, Republicans instead insisted it be read in its entirety on the floor of the House before a vote was taken.
House Bill 3427, a bill for an act. Be it enacted by the people of the state of Oregon. Fund for Student Success. Add Section 1. Effective date, Section 84. This 2019 Act takes effect on the 91st day after the date on which the 2019 regular session of the 80th Legislative Assembly adjourns sine die.
At the end of the reading, it passed by the required 3/5 supermajority on a party line vote. Backroom deals were made by Speaker Kotek to get it past the finish line. But when the bill reached the floor of the Senate the following week, most of the Senate Republicans did not show up, depriving the Democratic majority of a quorum to do business. Here is Senate President Peter Courtney that week.
So we don't have a quorum, so we can't do the agenda, can't do what we came here to do in the floor today. So I have to stop the session now because we don't have 20, and without 20 we cannot, per the Constitution, proceed. We're starting to fall really behind in our workload and the work we got to do here. So tomorrow, even though we're moving into that wonderful Mother's Day weekend, I'm going to have to ask you, would you please come here to be here at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. This Senate, Oregon Senate, is adjourned without a quorum until Monday.
Democratic leaders announced a PERS plan on Friday, lessening some of the Republican resistance. In intense negotiations over that weekend, Democrats agreed to drop two controversial bills, one a gun control bill and another one on childhood vaccinations. On Monday, Republicans returned to the Senate, and the Student Success Act was passed, again on a party line vote. Governor Brown signed it into law later in the week.
Next week, we'll have part 2 of our review of Oregon politics in 2019, so be sure to join us then. Look for us on one of our social media accounts, or you can sign up for our email list on our website at socialadvance.org. And if you can give us a small donation via the website, it will help us keep going for another year. For a wider view of politics in our times, check out my podcast, named, of course, A Wider View. It can be found at widerviewradio.podbean.com and on YouTube, Apple, and Google Play. Thanks for watching, and remember, a new year is a good chance to make a fresh start and do better, as is every day. Happy New Year from us to you.